a little bit about your journey to get here and why you chose to build a business and a brand around life and business resiliency?
Everything is this evolution. Just like our careers, I started as a finance person, graduated with my MBA in international finance, got one of those exciting corporate jobs. And I was always on stage and I was speaking, but it was teaching people about other things, products, compliance, and it was very easy to do that. When I left my corporate job in 2020 and pivoted, I had to build the brand that was this company. But what I didn't do in the beginning was connect it to me personally and realize that the stories I'm telling now, the products I'm telling now are me. They're my experiences and my lessons that I'm trying to share with others. And so it's definitely something I continue to push with my clients, is because I see a lot of them make that same first mistake. Is they're so used to being able to detach like the brand and the product as something else from the work that they do. But in our businesses, that's generally not the case anymore.
Welcome to the Turbo Branding Show, where we will help you ignite your growth by leveraging your brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. You'll discover insightful conversations from our powerful guests, founders, and CEOs of thriving businesses who are sharing how they have successfully built strong brands to help you expand and grow. I'm your host, Sue Kirshner, and today we're welcoming Nikki Green to the show. So let's delve into today's episode and turbocharge your brand. So first, thank you so much for being here, Nikki. I'm so excited that you agreed to join me on the show here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll start off I'm going to read your bio to introduce you, but please feel free to add more at the end because I know you have so many awesome things going on. But Nikki Green is a life and business resiliency expert who's been in the international business industry for over 20 years and is a 5-time published author. She's an avid traveler, visiting 16 plus countries and completing 7 marathons and dozens of triathlons across 3 continents. So you go, girl. But Nikki has dedicated her life to assisting others reduce their fear and go after their dreams. Her passion is empowering people to reach their full potential. So anything else you would want to add to that amazing bio there, Nikki?
I love that bio because it really is like the new brand of me. But anyone that knew me before would be like, wait, who is this chick? I don't even know who she is. I was a finance person, very kind of uptight, very strict about the rules and compliance and all that. So it's beautiful that we can step into our new brand as we kind of change and pivot our careers and do new things.
Awesome. All right. Perfect. So I can't wait for you to share your branding insights with us today and a little bit more about your journey. But when we met and you told me about your brand, your thought leadership platform, your vision for the future, I was fascinated and so thrilled to share it with my audience. So let's dig in, shall we? But tell me a little bit about your journey to get here and why you chose to build a business and a brand around life and business resiliency.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because everything is this evolution. Just like our careers, I started, like I said, as a finance person, graduated with my MBA in international finance, got one of those exciting corporate jobs. And I was always on stage and I was speaking, but it was teaching people about other things, products, compliance, and it was very easy to do that. When I left my corporate job in 2020 and pivoted, I had to build the brand that was this company. And so just like all of them, I was like, okay, well, my company is called Green Chameleon Collective, and here's the brand and what it looks like. But what I didn't do in the beginning was connect it to me personally and realize that the stories I'm telling now, the products I'm telling now are me. They're my experiences and my lessons that I'm trying to share with others. And so it's definitely something I continue to push with my clients, is because I see a lot of them make that same first mistake. Is they're so used to being able to detach like the brand and the product as something else from the work that they do. But in our businesses, that's generally not the case anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely not the case anymore. So you mentioned your company name, but can you explain a little bit more about where did that name come from? And then what is the brand of the company?
Yeah, I thought really long and hard about this brand, and I was very excited about it. And, so obviously my name is Nikki Green. So we start with green as Green Chameleon Collective, but there's a deeper meaning behind it. And that's where the chameleon piece comes in. When I talk about with my clients, what I'm really trying to do is bring out their uniqueness. And usually when people say you're a chameleon, they're saying kind of it in a negative way, like you're trying to convert into what everybody else wants you to be. But I actually read the scientific study while I was doing this brand research that said exactly the opposite. When a chameleon is calm and they're zen and they're in their elements and happy in the trees, they're green. They're camouflaged because they don't need anything. They're perfect in the environment that they're in. When they change color, they are trying to say something's not right. I'm not happy. I need something else, a mate, food, temperature change, all these things. And that's what I want for us too, for us to be able to honestly say when things aren't right and to be able to know when we're calm and zen. And the collective piece is that we do it together, that we're not in these, solopreneur journeys and all in these silos, but really how do we come together as a collective and help each other find that vulnerability so we can bring out our unique qualities and experiences.
Awesome. Awesome. So in terms of equity, because I love that whole story about the chameleon and I love how it's in your logo and you definitely bring that out in all of your marketing pieces and things like that. But where are you putting the equity or the brand emphasis? Is it in the company name or is it in your name? Is it Nikki Green?
Well, that was my hard first lesson. So I spent all this great time researching, building the brand. I was so excited. My family put together this beautiful logo that it's wood. It's actual wood, this thing. And
yeah.
I made all of my website, my social hashtags, everything was Green Chameleon Collective. And then I sat down with a chief marketing officer friend of mine, and we were just having a couple of drinks. And he goes, that's not a great name for other people to remember and use. He said, and that's when he really started sharing. The brand is you. You are the brand. You are going to be the one up on stage. You're the one coaching them. Your experiences is what you're telling them. That brand of Green Chameleon Collective only right now means something to you. It will eventually mean something to them, but the thing they're going to connect with is you. So he was like, you got to step out of the shadows and in to that light. So it was a tough lesson, but it was really important. I'm glad I did it early on. So I started changing all my handles and my website and everything. And now everything is the Nikki Green. The other thing is there's a celebrity named Nikki Green who used to be an actress on Dawson's Creek. So that couldn't be me. So I had to be the Nikki Green. So we learn as we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love that. I love that. And it's hard because when you're branding yourself, you have to get vulnerable too, right? Because if you want people to understand you and how you got there and what, you're offering and things like that, you have to really dig deep and look inside and say, well, what are my values? What am I offering and things like that? And sometimes it's even hard to look at yourself and do that. I know when I started my brand, I reached out to a bunch of people and said, help me see myself as other people will see me and things like that. So building on that, then who is Nikki Green? What is the promise or the value that you offer people if they work with you, collaborate with you? What do you want them to know about you?
Yeah, when I was putting together my recent book, Chameleon Mindset, which is kind of the foundation for my coaching, I always struggled with that first line, like, how do you open the book? So I started Googling top entry, how do you start a book? And Moby Dick comes up and it's like, who is Ishmael and is he even real, right? It's like one of the most famous opening lines. And so I started my book, Who is Nikki Green and is she even real? Because Nikki Green has become such a persona, of who I am on stage and coaching. It also feels like sometimes she's not, who I want to be, sometimes just hanging out with my family and friends. But the other funny side of that story is I talk about in my first book, Nikki Green isn't my born name. I wasn't born Nikki Green. I was born Brandy Nicole Walls. And because of my complicated history with my father, I wanted to change my name as I got older. And so I actually did change my name so I could take on my mom's name. I moved my middle name to my first name. But these are the things that as you start to really embrace who you are, you realize all these pieces that may not fit of things other people gave you, other ways people saw you. Okay. And so the name itself also allowed me to step into, this is how I see myself. And she was able to become a persona, but then also legally change my name.
I love that. That's a fascinating story. Yeah, because you talk about companies rebranding, but here you are, you're rebranding your name, in fact. And I love the idea that you're like, what's important to me and what do I want to be? How do I want to show up and represent myself?
Mhm.
So building on that too, before we jump into some other questions, is how are you different from other coaches, other speakers? I mean, how do you make sure that people who are booking you to speak or hiring you as a coach or things like that, how do you tell them you're going to be different or what they're going to get out of, working with you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not your typical kind of finance person, and I have all this great business background, but what I bring is so much energy. And that's usually what people can see, even when they're just watching me virtually on a podcast or a virtual summit. And that energy goes like 10x when I'm actually in person. And so it's really, how do you make that connection? If you can make that connection so clear while you're here in a virtual space, how do you 10x that energy and be authentic? A lot of times you'll see these showboaty people, the kind of Tony Robbins feel of like them running around on stage, but you do kind of question, like, is that genuine? Is that how they're going to be when you just sit down and talk to them?
Right.
And I love that the best feedback I always get from people and that I use for referrals on my website and when I'm trying to book speaking gigs is sitting down with Nikki feels like a private conversation, no matter how many people are in the room. That you feel that connection of a real, genuine story of something that has really happened to me and affected me, positive, negative, whichever way it happened, and that people can relate. And that's where the lesson becomes really something actionable for them. It's not like some crazy thing happened to her and that never happened to me, but they find parallels. And so that really moves them into action, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, no, I like that. And then I was fascinated with the stories you were telling me when we first met too about you visually brand yourself too a little bit when you're on stage. So maybe you could talk about the props or the different colors you use and things like that. So,
Yeah, it was funny. So, I've always dyed my hair. My parents were barbers, so I had the pleasure of like being able to get whatever crazy hairstyle I wanted to. And so I was always changing color and style and all these things. So I've been pretty much every color of the rainbow. Right now it's summer and I'm in the pool, so it's mostly blonde.
yeah, you don't
um,
want to mess with the dye and the chlorine, right?
exactly. Those two things don't go together. I learned that the hard way.
Right.
But throughout that time is like every time I'm doing an event, every time like am I releasing my book is about being green, being calm. So my hair was green. And then the rest of me you can see is generally very business-like. And so someone actually called me at an event a reverse mullet, like party on the top and business on the bottom. So I love it. It's just something that connects people. And like if I'm only 5'3", so sometimes like trying to see me across a room, if you don't know who you're looking for, is like, I'm the girl with the blue hair. Oh, she's probably going to be easy to find. So you look at the event, you look at what you're doing, and as best you can, you match your clothes, your makeup, your hair. For guys, similar things like what makes sense for that environment, but how do you make it you? Sometimes I have a chameleon pin, etc. So
Yeah. No, I love that. And you told the story too, but you used to have a little chameleon that you would have on your shoulder when you were speaking and things like that. So, no, but I love that because again, I'm riffing on the chameleon idea, but Nikki Green, obviously when you come out with green hair, you couldn't be more in your face about remembering, the green. But again, it goes back to even though you change your hair color all the time, like a chameleon changes colors, you're still you. You're still Nikki. The brand is still the same, even though the outer trappings might be a little bit different. But I love that you do that because a lot of times we don't think about the visual cues. Everybody thinks about the brand when it comes to visual, but there are visual cues when you interact with people, right? So I remember eons ago, there was a salesman who was trying to sell me print at one point in my career when I was buying, print for marketing brochures and all this kind of thing and all that stuff. And he always had a carnation in his lapel when he would come out and visit me. And I was like, what are you doing with that? And he's like, every morning, he goes, it's part of my ritual is I get up, I go buy a fresh flower. I put it in my lapel and that's what I wear all day. And I was like, well, why do you do that? Do you just like flowers kind of thing? He goes, no, because there's so many print sellers out there. It's a way for me to stand up. Even if you don't remember my name, you'll remember, oh, it's the guy with the carnation, kind of a deal. And it helped, he said, for people to remember him and to call him when they had a need. So I love that, using visual cues to help people remember you and to differentiate you. So tell me a little bit about how your brand has evolved over time, that opportunities arose. And I know at one point you were even targeting a completely different target market with your services and things like that. So walk me through how your brand has evolved, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. In the beginning, you sit down and you're like, what's my niche audience and who's my avatar? And you do those things. And especially when you first leave, like you really don't know. You don't know what's possible. You don't know what the market looks like. So
Right.
you're just coming up with the concept. And I opened my business during the pandemic and I had just barely moved to Chicago. So even if I had been out and about, I don't know anybody here.
Yeah.
So, how do you create a business, which the ultimate goal is to be in person at conferences, on stage, where you can't do any of those things? And so I really started looking at, here in Chicago, there are tons of wonderful schools. And one of the most pivotal points in my life was when I was in university and when I was trying to find myself. And I really didn't care. Like I knew I needed to go to school and I was good at school, but did I care about business? Did I care about finance? No, I just wanted a job that paid me well.
Yeah.
And then I just saw during the pandemic so many young people being disillusioned. Like they thought, oh, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to make all this money, I get a cool car and nice clothes, and I go work downtown and I do all this stuff. And none of that was happening. You're working in your PJs in your kitchen
You're
table.
not meeting anybody and you feel sad. Yeah.
Yeah, or you're not making new friends, you're not having people kind of push you, you're just isolated. And so I really wanted to reach out to a lot of those people as they were kind of going through that first transition and help them just find connection. And so that's where the collective began. And I still work with a number of young people because they're still lost even, years later after the pandemic, because they're still struggling with half at home, half in the office, not really connecting. But then what happened is a lot of their parents started contacting me. So the parents were also in a transition because they were going through an empty nest. The kids were now fully out of college, doing their own thing, and the parents had had pretty good careers so they could support their kids, but now they wanted something more for themselves. And so many of the parents started coming to me and saying, well, I want to transition now too. I want to build a business. I want to take this hobby to something more, or maybe even just a career, pivot itself. So it was so great that I was able to do this. And then that's where the central theme of people in transition comes in, rather than having to be so niche. The niche helps you market so you get to the right people, but it allowed me a bigger umbrella of the brand so that I could attract a wider audience. So that was fun.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I like that. And where does, when you talk about that, and I think it's in there, but is that what resiliency means to you? Is this ability to pivot, to transition, or does it mean something else to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers in there. But, one of the things, especially about owning a business or starting something new, is it's not just trying something once or 10 times. It's about trying something 100 times, 1,000 times. And how do you keep going at it and just try things a little bit different, a little to the left, a little to the right? Maybe I got to go backwards. Maybe I got a U-turn. How do we keep poking, poking, poking until you find the right formula that really comes together and works? And so that's the resilience, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. Many of us give up after just a few tries and just say it's not working. So for me, that's where I try to push people.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So this is something that people might be interested in knowing too, but as you've grown, as you've launched and even evolved and things like that, what marketing activity has been most successful for you to get the word out and awareness about your brand, but also to help you build your business?
Yeah, for me, obviously it's in my bio. I love traveling. And it was really tough in the pandemic. I went from traveling every 1 to 2 weeks a month with my corporate job to, nothing, to like barely going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And so as things opened up, the best thing for me was like getting on the road. So in 2023, I did 150 speaking engagements. I was on the road nonstop And I loved it. I loved it. And I was able to do so many things through that, to be able to see new places, to be able to try new things, but also to connect in person with people that I had been meeting online for the previous couple of years. And then everyone there, you have this deeper connection. You sit down and chat, you have a cup of coffee, you have a glass of wine, whatever all those things are that help you get to the next level. You give them a referral, they give one in return. And from there, my business grew exponentially. So when I got to this year, I didn't have to really do much to get leads. Leads came my way because I had already built those deeper connections with people. So
Oh, I like that. So how did you get the 150 speaking engagements? Did you hire a booking agency or was it just just grit, you just reaching out to everybody?
one, I will travel at the drop of a hat. So anybody
Just
knows.
invite me.
Also, because I've been traveling for so long, I have really good rewards with hotels, airlines, and things like that. So I get good rates. I can use points. And I also have a lot of friends in lots of places. So sometimes if I have a place to stay.
Awesome.
So from the very beginning of the year, January kicked off, and I said, hey, I'm trying to get on podcast stages, whatever. And so a friend of mine said, hey, someone dropped out of this podcasting event I'm at. Do you want to fly to Salt Lake City? It's like January 15th. Can you go this weekend to Salt Lake City?
Yeah.
You'll get interviewed on 15 podcasts. It's also a mastermind. You're going to meet all these high-level entrepreneurs, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Done. Okay. Booked. Let's go to Salt Lake City. I got to visit some friends while I was in town. I met a bunch of lovely people.
Yeah.
I still do business with all of those people. So there was, 25, 30 people in the room. I then saw them the next week at my planned conference in Orlando at PodFest when I was promoting my book. And that was just January. So everything begat another thing. And it was like keeping those leads fresh, keeping that continuity so that people don't forget who you are. You ask where they're going and see if you can tag along and find if there's a way for you to do that. And every conference I'm at, go meet the event planner, go talk to who's there and see what else is going, and before you know it, the whole year fills up and the year after that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. What role has the podcast played for you? Because I know I'm just getting started at this, but what I've been absolutely amazed at, and in the back of your mind, this is true, but when it happens, you're like, wow, epiphany kind of a thing. But what it's allowed me to do is to reach and talk to so many amazing, cool people that no one would have introduced me to if I said, oh, I'm looking for business, right? I'm looking for a consulting lead kind of a thing. But when you say, hey, I just want to have a conversation, suddenly you meet the most interesting people, like you, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. Podcasting has opened up a lot of doors. And, like many people, I started mine just because I was bored in the pandemic and I was like, well, I need to practice my speaking. So here we go. I'm going to have a free stage where no one can stop me.
Right. Exactly.
But it really evolved into exactly what you said. It became a networking mechanism. So that way now I could be more selective with the guests that I picked. I needed to make sure that they were great business partners or potential clients or, just cool people to hang out with.
Right.
And so as I pivoted to do that more with my podcast, one, I enjoyed it more, but then also many of them had podcasts. So it was an immediate swap instead of just like me pushing, the materials out, and it kept evolving. And so then I kept getting also invited to bigger shows and being able to quickly promote my books or whatever new things were going on in my business. So I think it's a really great mechanism. I think people really underestimate it because a lot of people use it as a one and done. Oh, you were my guest, bye, here's your graphics, go promote. And it really doesn't grow the audience because you're not really building that camaraderie.
Yeah.
And people have invited me back to their shows. I've invited them back to mine. And so you keep that kind of going. So I really want to encourage people, like if you are doing a podcast, that don't do the one and done, use it as a real mechanism for referrals, leads, and networking. So.
I love that. I love that. No, that's great. I'm taking that advice. So thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So a couple more questions here for you, if you don't mind. But I know you do a lot of work with startups, and we were talking about that with you coaching, people trying to launch their business, their dreams. And, obviously you talk about how you have to be resilient and all that, but do you talk about branding at all with clients when they're starting to, launch? And if you do, what are you talking to them about in terms of what's the importance of it?
Yeah, it's the same journey that I went through that I see reflected in most of my clients. They are coming from some identity of who they were and what they attached that meaning to, how much money they made, what kind of title they had, maybe what brand they worked for, academic, hospital, company wise.
Yeah.
And now, how to create their own brand. They do a lot what I do. Here's my business, here's my clients, and it's a very distance thing. And you can feel that it's not really resonating with who they're trying to attract.
Okay.
So it's getting them in the right mindset. How do we pull that down and get rid of the mask and figure out who you really want to be in this business? Because this is your opportunity to do it. You left that for a reason because you didn't want to be that anymore. So what are you now? And it's
Mhm.
hard because most of us haven't really asked that question in a very long time.
No, it's
So
hard. It's definitely hard to ask it and then be able to truthfully answer it. So, yeah.
yes, exactly. So branding is always a pretty central part. It's always part of the mindset work that we do with people as they're doing their transitions to start to build that up for themselves, not just like, let me journal and here's the things I'm grateful for, but really like, what does this look like, and who can I become?
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. So tell me a little bit, what's next for you? And, how does that help strengthen your brand as you go forward?
Yeah, well, sitting at home is not my ideal way to work for sure. And so I had always envisioned, being out and about. And the best part about being on all those stages and connecting with people is I heard the same thing from all of them. They're really done with the Zoom gloom. Like it's fine if I need to kind of, quickly do a couple of meet and greets, but they want real connection.
Yeah.
They want to do in-person experiences and get to know people on a deeper level and have longer term relationships with folks. And so for me, that added this component this year, which is in-person retreats. So yes, I still do virtual coaching so that it's convenient for folks to be doing that regularly during running their business. But at least once a quarter, I want us to get together to do the deeper work, build those connections, and grow from there. So I'm really excited about this component because I think it's not only good for me mentally to get out of the house
Yes,
and
to get out. Yes.
but it's great for my clients to be able to do that. And I'm partnering with some other wonderful coaches so they can go deeper on different topics with them that I don't necessarily specialize in. So
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. If someone would just pay me to travel around the world constantly, I would jump on that in a second. So a couple more questions for you that I'm going to kind of add something new to the podcast since I can do that since we've just started and are in the process of still launching. But going forward, I'm going to ask my guests a new question to honor businesses who are building a strong brand because I want to give them a shout out for all of their efforts. So I'm going to ask you, what's a business that you admire for their branding?
yeah, and I've worked with some really big companies in Silicon Valley, and I've seen, how they pivot, but I also saw how they weren't really congruent with what they were saying. So I think for me, some of the brands I really love are, especially for me, fitness is such a big piece. Brands that are more honest with like who they feel. One of those is like REI. I love REI that they are so congruent with they give back to the earth, they give back to youth sports, and they're really true to like kind of what they're doing. And so it's sort of brands like that I'm starting to learn more about and seeing how I can help my clients do that as well. Is like how do you incorporate your mission and your values so clearly with the brand that there is no like one or the other.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. And then one more question for you that's a little bit new is another thing that I try and get across to people is the fact that the brand is more than just your logo and your messaging. It's also the experience, right? So as to do something fun, because you love to travel, I love to travel, I love to absolutely savor life, whether that's restaurants, whether it's experiences, traveling, all these kinds of things. I want to hear what's a great experience that you've had lately, something that I should put on my list of things to do.
Yeah, domestically, I've been traveling sort of since the pandemic, but I miss international travel. For me, that was just such a transformative experience. And one of my favorite places to go is Singapore. And if you love food, Singapore is definitely a place to
Okay.
go. And I've gone there dozens of times for work in the past, but now I have wonderful friends that live there too. And so it was a place I never expected to go. I never really thought of it because it's a little tiny 3 mile island, but it's so rich with culture and history and great food and just cool stuff to do. So not super approachable for everybody to just go overnight, but it is a cool place of like a bucket list place that I always encourage people. And then from there, like the rest of Asia is so accessible to go check out as well. But the food is amazing. They've got 3 different cultures really blending on that island, and you never know what you're going to experience while you're there.
Awesome. 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 All right. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for spending time with me today and sharing your insights on branding. I love having conversations on this. So, but if people want to work with you or book you to speak, how can they find you?
Yeah, you can definitely catch me on my YouTube channel at the Nikki Green. There's our podcast and lots of other interesting topics, so you can learn a little bit more about me and my coaching.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. It's always fun to talk with you. So, and then thank you for joining us for this episode of the Turbo Branding Show. You're an important part of our community, and I hope you've been inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand. And if you enjoyed this episode, we need your help to grow and reach more people. So please share it and be sure to like and subscribe. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the shows and the mission of the show. So please send me a message or leave a review for us. And if you know someone who would be a great guest for this show, an inspiring founder or CEO, please let me know as well in the comments or connect me via email or on one of my social media platforms below. But thank you and stay tuned for our next episode.